Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to take a look at one of the most significant and important congressional races in the country, not just the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But first, how about this? My special guest is the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Wolf. What can they say? It's all about the budget. Let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, this past week, the governor made his budget address to the General Assembly, $36.1 billion, about $1.65 billion more than last year, or a 4.22% hike. Governor Wolf, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Did I get that right? I want to make sure I started out. All right, I don't even know where to start. I do, but there's so much in your budget. But before we get into the specifics, you seem very upbeat, ebullient, optimistic. I mean, the tone of it was in some ways very different from a lot of past budget messages. Take it.
Well, it was my sixth budget address. Right. I think the last two have been equally optimistic. I'm not calling for any tax increases. Yeah. In fact, I'd like to reduce the corporate net income tax.
That's correct.
But I think we're in a spot where when I first got here with my first budget, we had a 9-month impasse. And as I said in the budget speech, it was an exercise in masochism to do the budget. Now, things are going well. I track the revenues every day. We're ahead of estimate this year on revenues. And I think we can do some things to think about how we can make people's lives better. So my budget was really an effort to do that. So I talked about things like scholarships. I know you want to ask about these things, but
education has been, I mean, you have priorities, but I would say, following your career closely, that education has been your now you may disagree, your number one priority right from the start. Public school funding has been a major component of your policy agenda.
Schools that jobs that pay, government that works.
Students that learn?
Yes. And that's, so I think over this is the sixth budget, but over those 6 budgets, I have invested heavily in education and enjoyed broad bipartisan support. We've worked across the aisle to as you know, the General Assembly is majority Republican. And
the budget was passed a couple days early last year, if I remember. The current budget, I should say.
And the one before it was too.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time in decades that the budgets have been in, not only the budget, but the codes. Everything was done before the deadline.
Look, before I get to some specifics, here's something that I've noted. You noticed how harsh and bitter the two parties are. Look what happened in the President's State of the Union message. I mean, it's brutal. The difference here is you disagree, obviously, on major policy issues with the Republicans in the legislature, but it doesn't seem like personal and divisive, and none of that rhetoric exists here. And I'd like to point that, or am I wrong about that?
No, I think that's right. I think, well, you're an academic and have an academic background. I think if you look at the world in terms of a Venn diagram, each one of us is different. We're our own circle, but we intersect with others.
But the polarization is so great, and the bitterness so great, and that seems, you disagree.
Well, that's what I think. I think in these circles, you can the choice we have is, do you want to focus on what makes us different, or you want to focus on where we might intersect? Don't change or compromise on any values or principles, but just the way you are, you actually have some agreement with folks, maybe as different as some of these conservative Republicans. So let's sit down, and instead of just constantly trying to remind ourselves how I'm over here and I'm just different than you, let's remind, because I veto probably more bills than most governors have, but we've also gotten a lot of things done. I remember when we did pension reform, Senator Corman, Republican majority leader of the Senate, stood up in the rotunda and said, "Hey, we're not like Washington. We can actually work across the aisle and get things done."
All right, let's talk about a couple of specifics. Let's go to the business for scholarships for students in the state system, where you want to take money out of the horse racing fund.
$200 million.
In a sense, that's controversial. So what was your thinking about the scholarships that go to the state system students?
First of all, we're leaving $50 million in the horse racing fund. By contrast, New Jersey has $20 million in their horse racing fund, so we're $30 million ahead of New Jersey in that. But we've had $250 million go into the horse racing fund since 2004, so that's, 16 years.
Right.
So that's billions of dollars for purses. And in a budget, you're looking and saying, okay, I have a pool of money here. What are the priorities? What should be the priorities? And you sort of say, okay, here's $200 million going for horse race purses, and could we use that $200 million to help kids get through school without heavy amounts of debt?
We're second in the country in student debt.
Exactly.
$37,000 on average when students leave public institutions.
So horse race
Private
owners, purses versus helping kids pay their way through school, I'm going to go with the kids. And I think that's what the calculation was there. So there's always some controversy when you move something from one place to another, but I think if we're talking about priorities, we're talking about things that we've got to figure what we're going to do with these scarce resources. I'm going to do this.
Okay, we got to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about gun violence and your proposals for gun control. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, sitting across from me is my special guest, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. He issued his budget message to the state legislature last week. Or the past week, whatever that means. Let's go to gun violence. It's something that you really pointedly went after gun violence, and you have a couple of proposals. What are they?
Well, I want to do things like, and these are things that I think enjoy broad support among Pennsylvanians, things called red flag laws that help people say, you shouldn't, to a loved one, you shouldn't, or someone I know, you shouldn't have a gun, and let someone know. Lost or stolen guns. We have so many crimes committed with lost or stolen guns, stolen from law-abiding citizens, doing things that they wouldn't do, but they're being done. So that kind of thing. Universal background checks. And looking at investing money, we've invested a lot of money already in metal detectors and things like that for schools. Let's invest in counselors and people who might be able to help us identify students who are in trauma and who might actually do some bad things before it happens. So these are the things that but the broad context was let's actually stop yelling at each other and let's have a conversation, because in the end, almost all of us have a vested interest in a safe place. And I pointed out, I said the Second Amendment is absolutely essential. But let's figure out how to make it work so that we can recognize the Second Amendment, and I can also walk into a mall or a movie theater or a house of worship without fearing for my life. We have that with the First Amendment. We freedom of speech, but we sit down, we figure out, can we yell fire in a crowded movie theater?
Prospect for passage?
Well, I thought we were almost getting there with some of these things last year. I think if they were allowed to come up for a vote, got out of committees and all that kind of thing, got on the calendar, I think they'd pass.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn to another subject, and that has to do with the minimum wage, something that you've pushed. You wanted $12 immediately, going to $15 a few years down the line. Most of the states around us have increased their minimum wage at $7.25. we have the federal minimum wage, $7.25.
The lowest in the in this area.
Yeah, and you did, the Senate did send over to the House a minimum wage, I think it was $9.50.
Went to $9.50 over time, yes.
$9.50. House hasn't taken it up. You're back with a higher version at $12. What?
Well, I think I've been calling for an increase in the minimum wage now every budget I've given.
Yeah.
And I just think it's wrong for Pennsylvanians to be paid less, have a lower minimum wage than, say, any of our neighbors. I mean, Maryland is $11. I think even West Virginia is $8.75. We're at $7.25. That's $15,000 a year. You can't a full-time job. You can't afford to live on that. That's not. So and we recognize that. So if you're making minimum wage and you're working full-time, your family qualifies for CHIP programs, for SNAP benefits, for all kinds of benefits. There's taxpayer money going in to subsidize those companies that are paying less than.
Talking about money, you also want to increase the starting salary for teachers, which is at $18,000, if I got that correct.
Yeah.
And you want to push it up. Is it $45,000? Do I remember that correctly?
Yes.
And as I say, I have to be careful about this as a lifelong college professor, so I have to be neutral on it, but take it.
Well, it's part of a thing. I think I was at a Carlisle High School yesterday, and someone said, what should we do to try to encourage more people to go into teaching, because there are fewer and fewer people want to get into it. And he said, is the scholarship going to help? And I said, well, I hope it helps, because it's intended to keep people in Pennsylvania. But one of the things we can do is actually pay them a decent salary. The future of Pennsylvania goes through our classrooms. And if we don't recognize that with the compensation we give our teachers and our professors,
and more, there are jobs available, but people don't have the appropriate skills, background, and a lot of it is in the technology area. A lot of it is in the skilled trades, and that's another aspect of it, right?
Right. And I think we have the foundation here in Pennsylvania to actually address that. We have great schools, basic education. We have great universities. I think, are we second or third in the country in terms of the seats in higher education?
I think we have over 100 colleges the last time I checked.
Right. So I think maybe there might be one or two states that are ahead of us, but we have so many students come to Pennsylvania to go to school, and then they leave. I want them to stay here.
We have to run to another break. I want to talk about something that you've put in here that the business community should like, and that's lowering the corporate net income tax, and we'll get to that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Governor Tom Wolf is my special guest. We're talking about his recent budget address to the General Assembly of Pennsylvania. All right, I want to talk about something, the corporate net income tax. You want to reduce it. Why do you want to reduce it?
Well, right now it's at 9.99%. And actually, back when I was still in business, I was on the Business Tax Reform Commission. I think that was 2003 or something like that. And that was the first time I really looked at the corporate net income tax rate. It's the highest in the country. I think Iowa has a higher marginal rate, the top rate.
Right.
But ours is a flat tax. It's 9.9, almost 10%. And the thing is that companies outside of Pennsylvania will look at that, and you can say all you want. Oh, there are all kinds of loopholes and things that you can do, but if you just keep it at 10%, people outside of Pennsylvania look in and say, well, Pennsylvania obviously doesn't want business. And that's not true. We want businesses to come here. So there's a sticker shock. And I've been trying to address that for the last 6 budgets, and I'll keep trying.
Hey, talking about taxes, you also want to, and you've put this either in your budget or related, a tax on the amount of natural gas extracted from each well. We already have an impact fee. That's a tax on the actual.
Yes.
location, if you will, of a well, and you want to do what you call Restore Pennsylvania, which is an infrastructure deal. So
yeah, I would, again, it's trying to look at where we have an opportunity, and I go out whenever there's a flood. You know, you go to up in the northern tier, so many parts of Pennsylvania where we don't have internet access or even cell phone access, and we have older communities with blight. Back before I did this budget with the toxic schools, and I have $1 billion in this, but there are all kinds of things that local municipalities, Republican and Democrat, rural, urban, all over the Commonwealth, would love to have some funding for. And when you go out to, say, a flood, and if the federal government's threshold is somewhere around $18 million, if a municipality doesn't reach $18 million, there's no money. And so all you do is shrug your shoulders. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do.
But it's a tough sell in the state legislature where you've tried this several times now. Yeah,
now I think, but it's a unique opportunity. And what I keep trying to say is we Pennsylvanians pay a severance tax right now. And I'm not talking about the impact fee, and I want to keep that in place.
Sure.
This would be on top of that, and it would be a modest fee, so that the combination of the existing impact fee and what I'm proposing would still be less than the rate that Texas is, like 4 or 5% if you look at, and it's phased in depending on what the market price of natural gas is. What I'm saying is that when we fill up our tank of gasoline or car, you're paying a severance tax. You're just paying it to Texas or Louisiana. I want it to be paid to Pennsylvania for our flooding, for our broadband, for our school buildings, for our blighted communities. And if we did that, assuming $300 million a year for 20 years, the present value of that, I think 4 or 5% is like $4.5 billion.
Okay. Well, look, I want to thank you. You're always welcome. Your predecessors, Governors Corbett and Rendell, were on the show frequently. You're always welcome. You can call us, and we'll put you on. Democrat, Republican. We're not into the party. All right. The 10th Congressional District is going to be one of the hottest congressional races in the country. We have one of the candidates, Tom Breyer, coming on to chat with us about his candidacy, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Well, the 10th Congressional District in the state of Pennsylvania consists of the northern half of York County, Dauphin County, and parts of Cumberland. It's on everybody's radar as one of the most important congressional races in the country. Its current incumbent is Representative Scott Perry, a Republican. There are 2 Democrats that want to take him on in the general election. One of them is sitting across from me. He's Tom Breyer, an attorney who is seeking the office, along with Eugene DePasquale, the state's Auditor General, and Mr. DePasquale will get an invitation to come on as well. All right, Tom Breyer, there's only one question that is foremost, and that is, why in the heck are you running? You get that all the time. Why are you running for Congress?
Because I don't think we have a choice. I think 2020 will define the rest of our lives. And the 10th district is the most important district in the most important state in the most important election of our lifetimes. And to sit on the sidelines and not play a role in that was something that I just couldn't do. And so I figured if not now, really, then when? And I practice federal law. I feel like my expertise is in federal law. And it's a position that I feel like I'm ready for and I'm really excited about.
Yeah, well, okay. But have you held public office before?
Does class treasurer in high school count?
Are you running as an outsider? That's a theme that, has been fairly popular throughout American history. Well, outsider.
I'm running as someone who's new. I haven't been part of the establishment before, but what we're trying to do is to create a new sense of how people view public service. There was a poll recently that came out from Pew Research where they said that 84% of Americans don't trust politicians. We have to restore trust to public office. And so I'm not taking corporate money. We have really specific policy ideas on our website. We trust voters to be brave enough to be told the truth. And we're trying to run a really honest and different type of campaign and get new people involved in the political process, because in this era, I think that's what we need to change the way people think about public service.
Sure. One of the differences right now within the Democratic Party has to do with progressives, otherwise known as liberals, and sort of center-left. We see, that playing out big time in the presidential nomination battle that your party is going through, but it also is playing out in congressional districts. In a sentence, progressive, center-left, or is that, or you can dodge it if you want.
I'm going to go with, I'm Tom Breyer. I take each issue on its own merit, and I think that's what you have to do. And so if that means working across the aisle and with Republicans, that's something we have to do as well. We can't be rigid about our ideology. We have to take each issue as it comes to us and do what we think is best for our constituents. And so for me, there are certain issues like climate change. We just endorsed the Green New Deal because President Trump has rolled back 93 environmental regulations. He backed out of the Paris Climate Accord. He's pouring jet fuel on an inferno. I mean, this is a make or break moment for us right now, where we have a short window to fix this. And so something like that, for me, I will be as bold as humanly possible to fix that. But in terms of assigning a label to it, I've found that once you get into the weeds of policy, there really isn't a stigma with that.
All right, what about one of the big issues in the presidential campaign, it plays out in congressional elections as well, is Medicare for All, and the debate over whether 150, 160 million Americans can keep their private insurance. Where do you stand on that?
I think it's a good faith argument. The idea of Medicare for All is that we want everybody to have health care, which I agree with. But in looking at the healthcare system and talking to as many physicians as I can, I don't think it's a practical route right now. We have a chance to fix the ACA, provide a robust public option, and see where that gets us. But for right now, I think...
So you would allow for private insurance to continue, is that your point?
That's right.
All right, so what other major issue are you talking about in the campaign trail?
Gun control. We
just heard the governor weigh in on that.
And Governor Wolf just talked about this as well. Since the assault weapons ban expired in 2004, there's been a 183% increase in mass shootings and a 237% increase in total fatalities. It's just empirically true that if we have weapons of war on the streets, more people will die. And all you need to do is go into one classroom one time and see a student break down crying over a fear of someone coming in and committing a mass shooting to know that we have to change something. And for me, that's another one of those issues that I don't think we can be incremental with. I think red flag laws and background checks and closing loopholes is really important. But at the end of the day, it depends on whether we can get these weapons of war off the streets.
Yeah, and that's, well, we'll have to see. In this state, in the state legislature, it's not an easy sale. And remember, the same is true with the Republicans in the Senate and federally, where you'll have to go to. If you win, you'll be in the House, which is right. Democratic now, but we'll see. So we got about 15 seconds, your final message, besides vote for you.
We have a chance to do something really important and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we have to vote our values. Okay. And I would encourage people to look at mine and go with that.
Thanks for coming. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.